What would you do if your 4-year-old built something that could power your entire house, during a blackout? That's not the kind of question you expect to be asked over coffee. But that's exactly how it all started. A simple question. One that cracked open a story no one saw coming, not neighbors, not teachers, not even Elon Musk himself. Max Carter was just 4 years old when the lights went out across Maplewood Lane. It was one of those damp winter nights in suburban Ohio when the sky feels like it's pressing down on you. The wind whistled through drafty windows, and rain beat against the roof like nature was trying to get in. And then, bam, everything went black. The hum of refrigerators, the soft glow of bedside clocks, the gentle purr of the HVAC, it all died at once. The silence was so thick, you could hear people down the block stepping out onto their porches to check if it was just them. Sarah Carter, Max's mother, had just returned home from a double shift at the hospital. Her shoes were soaked. Her bones ached. And now, just as she was about to warm up leftover lasagna and crash, the power had cut. "Not tonight, please," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Max, who had been sitting cross-legged in the living room surrounded by torn-apart flashlights and stripped-down walkie-talkies, didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He didn't even ask what was happening. Instead, he stood up quietly, picked up a small, round, handheld device that looked like a mix between a Rubik's Cube and a solar-powered nightlight, and walked over to his mom. "Mommy," he said calmly, "I can fix it." Sarah turned to him with the kind of smile parents give when they're too tired to entertain make-believe. "That's sweet, honey. But right now, we just need to find some candles." "No," Max insisted, holding out the device. "I can fix it. I finished it today." "The sun bug." She blinked. "The what?" Before she could stop him, Max darted into his room, grabbed a tangled collection of wires, coils, and a glass panel that looked suspiciously like the busted solar charger Sarah had thrown away 2 weeks ago. He connected the pieces with surprising precision for someone who still struggled to tie his shoes. Sarah followed him, unsure whether to be amused or concerned. Then, he flipped a switch. And just like that, the lamps in the living room flickered back on. The heater hummed. The fridge rebooted. In the middle of a blackout, their house was glowing like a lighthouse in a sea of darkness. Outside, neighbors stared in disbelief. One even pulled out his phone to start recording. Sarah was speechless. She kneeled down, eyes level with her son. "Max, what is this?" Max shrugged in the innocent way only kids can. "It's just something I made. So we don't have to be cold anymore." What happened next spread like wildfire. By morning, the video had gone viral. The caption read, "A 4-year-old built this during a blackout. Somebody get Elon Musk on the phone." And, well, someone did. But we'll get to that. First, let's rewind. Let's go back to how a shy, quiet little boy ended up creating something no adult thought was possible. How a single moment of desperation turned into an invention that would challenge industries and raise eyebrows in Silicon Valley. Let's talk about Max Carter. The boy nobody believed. The genius hiding in plain sight. The child who didn't know how to read yet, but could rewire a broken security camera. Max was born on a windy Tuesday in April, 4 weeks early and already impatient with the world. Even as a toddler, he didn't speak much, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating, unblinking eyes, seemed to always be pulling apart whatever he saw. When other kids were playing with building blocks, Max was dismantling remote controls. While his daycare friends scribbled stick figures, Max drew circuit diagrams. His favorite toy was a busted old microwave Jeremy, the neighbor, had thrown out. Most parents would have panicked at the sight of their child prying open an appliance with a butter knife. But Sarah? She just sighed, took a picture, and Googled, "Is this normal?" It wasn't. But nothing about Max ever was. Sarah Carter was a single mom, juggling shifts as a nurse and freelance medical transcriptionist. She hadn't planned on raising a child alone, and definitely not one with, well, whatever Max was. Gifted? Maybe. But that word didn't do justice to what he could do. Still, Sarah did what all good mothers do, she adapted. She let him explore, provided whatever tools she could afford, and tried not to let fear overshadow wonder. She also made one rule very clear: Max, you can take apart anything you want, except the coffee maker. Mommy needs the coffee maker. Max had obeyed. Mostly. So that night, the blackout night, when the rest of the block sat in darkness, wondering how long they'd be without heat, Sarah was watching something even more powerful than electricity spark to life. She was watching belief awaken. Her son had done something no one expected. And somewhere, in another part of the country, that same viral clip was playing on a screen in a modern, steel-glass office. A man watched the video in silence. He rubbed his chin, tilted his head, and hit replay. Then, he turned to his assistant and said, "Get me the kid's name. I want to talk to him." His name? Elon Musk. But Max didn't know that yet. Want to know what happened next? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? To understand how Max Carter ended up creating a clean energy device before learning how to spell his last name, you have to go back, way back, before the lights, before the blackout, before Elon Musk even knew his name. You have to meet Max not as a child inventor, not as a viral sensation, but as he truly was, a quiet, wide-eyed kid with oversized headphones and a brain that just wouldn't quit. Max didn't talk until he was 3 years old. Doctors called it a developmental delay. Sarah called it Max being Max. Even before he spoke, he watched. He stared at patterns like he was reading invisible code. Ceiling fans mesmerized him. Power outlets fascinated him. He once stared at a blinking smoke alarm for 4 hours straight. Most kids screamed at bedtime. Max screamed when someone turned off the white noise machine. Sarah tried everything: colorful books, puppet shows, sensory toys. But what finally grabbed his attention wasn't something designed for toddlers at all. It was a broken kitchen timer. He picked it up at 16 months and wouldn't put it down. While most toddlers mouthed their toys, Max dissected his, quietly, obsessively. He didn't smash things for fun. He examined them. Gently. Like a surgeon. Sarah watched him one night on the baby monitor as he sat cross-legged in his crib, flashlight in hand, poking at the inside of a VCR like he was solving a mystery. There was a certain kind of beauty in it, tragic, if she was honest. Because while other parents were hearing their kids say "mama" and "dada," Sarah was reading articles titled "Signs of Childhood Autism" and "Is Genius Always a Gift?" The experts couldn't agree. Some said Max was neurodivergent. Others said he was gifted. A few said he might be both. Sarah didn't care about labels. She just wanted him to be okay. But Max wasn't interested in being okay. He was interested in understanding. By the time he turned 4, Max had developed an odd routine. He'd spend mornings quietly sketching what looked like alien hieroglyphics in a spiral notebook. To the untrained eye, it was scribbles. But Jeremy, the neighbor, recognized it immediately. "Sarah," he said one afternoon while flipping through the pages. "This is a wiring diagram." "A real one." Sarah laughed. "Max still confuses the letter B with the number 8. There's no way." But Jeremy wasn't joking. He had worked as a software engineer at Tesla years ago before being laid off during a round of cost cuts. Now he spent his time fixing old electronics in his garage. When Max wandered over one day and quietly watched him solder a circuit board, Jeremy offered him a spare board to play with. Max took it, walked off, and returned 20 minutes later with it fixed. It wasn't a fluke. Jeremy tested him again the next day. And the day after that. Each time, Max solved problems faster than Jeremy could explain them. At preschool, it was a different story. Max wasn't the kid singing loudly during circle time or bragging about his superhero backpack. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't participate in show and tell. He'd rather sit under the reading nook and sketch machines that didn't exist yet. His teachers grew concerned. He struggles with group play. He doesn't express feelings clearly. He isolates himself. Sarah nodded through the meetings, biting her tongue. Because what could she say? My son can't stack blocks, but he reverse-engineered our dishwasher. Did she even believe that herself? One night, after Max had gone to sleep, his headphones on, his nightlight humming softly, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table with a stack of bills, a cold cup of coffee, and the crushing weight of uncertainty. She had given up so much already, a full-time nursing job, her art degree, even the house she'd grown up in. And still, she felt like she was failing Max. He needed more. More than she could give. More attention. More resources. More understanding. But what if, just maybe, what he needed most was someone who believed in him without needing proof? Sarah glanced over at the spiral notebook Max had left behind. It was filled with more of his scribbles, arrows, symbols, rectangles, loops. And in the top right corner, carefully written in shaky letters. Sunbug version 1.0. She didn't know what it meant. But it looked like a blueprint. And something about it felt important. She touched the page gently, her fingers tracing the name. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar swell in her chest. The next morning, Max asked a question at breakfast, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. Mommy, what happens when lights go away? Sarah blinked. You mean like when the power goes out? He nodded. I want to make sure you're never in the dark again. That was the moment Sarah knew, Max wasn't building machines for fun. He wasn't just tinkering out of boredom. He was solving problems. His problems. Her problems. He was trying to protect her the only way he knew how. Not with words. Not with hugs. But with circuits and copper wire and solar panels ripped from a broken garden lamp. People would later ask, when did you first know your son was different? Sarah always gave the same answer. The day he asked how to stop the dark. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. The kind that settles into your bones when you've been running on empty for so long, you forget what full even feels like. That's where Sarah Carter lived, somewhere between hope and burnout, always one car breakdown or hospital bill away from drowning. Raising any kid alone is hard. Raising a kid like Max. That was something else entirely. He wasn't difficult in the traditional sense, no tantrums, no backtalk, no broken lamps from throwing fits. But he came with a different set of challenges. Ones that didn't come with parenting books or late-night support groups. Like how he couldn't handle loud sounds but was completely comfortable around buzzing transformers. Or how he could take apart a Wi-Fi router blindfolded, but cried if his socks felt weird. Or how he didn't say, I love you, like other kids. He showed it in code. In the circuits he built. In the fact that every device he made was somehow, in some small way, designed to make life easier for her. Sarah worked 2 jobs. Her main gig was as an ER nurse 3 days a week, 12-hour shifts that left her feet blistered and her voice hoarse. On the nights she wasn't at the hospital, she worked from home doing remote chart transcriptions. That meant squinting at medical notes until 2 a.m., her coffee going cold beside her laptop, while Max slept on the other side of the thin apartment wall. Their apartment was small, barely 2 bedrooms, one of which was more workshop than nursery. Max's room looked like Radio Shack exploded in it, wires, salvaged electronics, half-built gadgets, post-it notes with words like voltage and conversion scrawled in crayon. They lived in a rundown part of Columbus, Ohio, in a weather-beaten building with paper-thin walls and a landlord who still hadn't fixed the heat pump from last winter. But the rent was cheap. And the school district wasn't terrible. So they stayed. The struggle wasn't just financial. It was lonely. Sarah had few friends left. Not because they drifted away, but because she didn't have time to keep them close. And those who did stick around couldn't relate. "How's Max?" they'd ask, sipping their lattes at the rare brunch she made it to. "He's amazing," Sarah would say, forcing a smile. But what she really wanted to say was, "He's 4 years old and built something I don't even understand. I'm scared. I'm tired. And I don't know if I'm doing this right." Instead, she just nodded and changed the subject. There were moments, though, brief and shining, when she knew it was worth it. Like when she found Max curled up in the laundry basket fast asleep, surrounded by old calculator parts and an open sketchbook labeled, "Project, Clean Air." Or the time she heard him giggle quietly when he finally got a gear mechanism to spin the way he wanted. Or when he absent-mindedly handed her a tiny fan he made from broken plastic and said, "For when your coffee gets hot." Those moments made the struggle feel like something bigger. Not just survival. But purpose. Still, there were nights she couldn't pretend. Like when her bank account hit single digits and payday was still 5 days away. Or when the daycare called again, saying Max wasn't engaging, and they might need to reevaluate if this is the right fit for him. She didn't blame them. Max didn't fit into boxes. He didn't want to finger paint or pretend to be a dinosaur. He wanted to measure voltage and take apart old radios. One day, Sarah came to pick him up early and found him alone, in the corner of the playground, dismantling a toy truck while the other kids screamed around him. The teacher looked apologetic. "He doesn't play like the others." Sarah just nodded. She didn't know what to say. That night, Max sensed something was off. He climbed into her lap without a word, something he hadn't done in months, and laid his head on her chest. Sarah held him close, whispering into his hair. "You know Mommy loves you, right?" He didn't respond. But then he whispered, "I don't like loud things." "I know, baby. They make my head feel itchy." "I get that." After a moment, he added, "But wires are quiet. Wires make sense." She smiled through the tears she didn't want him to see. Yeah, they do." There was one moment that week Sarah would never forget. She had just finished a long shift and stopped by the grocery store on the way home. Her card got declined. Twice. She had to leave the cart, half filled with eggs, cereal, and the chocolate milk Max loved, and walk out with her head down. Back home, she opened the fridge and saw only a jar of mustard, an expired yogurt, and a near-empty jug of milk. She sat on the floor of the kitchen and let the weight crush her. Max peeked around the corner, holding a tiny flashlight he had made from a busted pen. "Mommy?" "Yeah, honey." He patted over in his little socks and held the flashlight up like an offering. "I made this. So you can see better when it gets dark." It wasn't much. Just a light. But it was his light. And in that moment, it felt like enough to keep her going one more day. Because sometimes, the smallest lights shine brightest when everything else goes dark. Most kids have an imaginary friend. Max had an imaginary lab. To the outside world, Max Carter was just a quiet, peculiar 4-year-old with headphones too big for his head and a collection of junk that looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic yard sale. But inside his mind, Max saw things differently. In his world, wires hummed with potential. Gears whispered secrets. Solar panels weren't just plastic and glass, they were promise. Promise that maybe, just maybe, he could make the world a little less broken. A little less loud. Max's room wasn't really a room anymore. It had slowly transformed into something between a tech workshop and a mad scientist's den. One corner had stacks of old batteries sorted by size. Another had a dismantled toaster wired up to a small fan. His bed was half covered in schematic drawings and empty juice boxes. Sarah had long since given up trying to fight the chaos. Instead, she made a rule: as long as it doesn't spark or smoke, you can keep it. It wasn't just a compromise. It was surrender. To Max, the world beyond his apartment door was confusing and chaotic. Crowded classrooms, unpredictable noises, blinking lights in grocery stores, it all felt like static to him. Like trying to tune into a radio station that never quite gets clear. But inside his room, everything made sense. Everything had rules. He could control the outcomes. If a light didn't turn on, it was because the wiring was wrong, not because someone changed their mind or broke a promise. He liked that. He trusted it. Most days after preschool, Max would quietly peel off his jacket, slip into his oversized hoodie, and retreat into what he called the lab. He didn't need instructions. He didn't need help. He had his own plans. Literally. Tucked beneath his mattress was a weathered sketchbook. The cover was covered in stickers, half-torn Lightning McQueen decals and a faded NASA logo he peeled off an old lunchbox. Inside, page after page of raw genius. Drawings of strange, beautiful machines. Some powered by sunlight. Others by wind. A few with names like Oxybox and Rainspin. But one design kept reappearing, tweaked, revised, circled in red marker. Sunbug. It started as a doodle, a bug-shaped device with solar panels for wings and tiny wheels underneath. The original version was crude, just a collection of shapes and arrows. But over time, it evolved. Wires were added. Notes in messy handwriting. Battery placements. Heat sinks. Light sensors. Max had no formal training. But somehow, his logic was flawless. He'd been piecing it together for months, scavenging parts from broken toys, old radios, garden lights neighbors threw away. Every component had a purpose. Every piece was leading somewhere. He just didn't know where yet. One rainy Thursday, Jeremy came over to drop off some old parts. He'd cleaned out a bin in his garage, resistors, microchips, and a few cracked circuit boards, and figured Max might enjoy digging through it. "Knock yourself out, little man," Jeremy said with a smile, handing over the crate. Max didn't say a word. But his eyes lit up in that quiet, focused way that meant something had clicked. Jeremy glanced at Sarah. "I think he's onto something." She sighed. "He's always onto something." Jeremy lowered his voice. "No, I mean really. He asked me yesterday how many amps it would take to run a fridge for 3 hours. Sarah blinked. "What did you say?" "I told him to go ask Google." Sarah chuckled, but inside, her stomach twisted. What kind of 4-year-old asked that question? That night, Max stayed up long after bedtime. Sarah heard him moving around, but didn't have the energy to scold him. She peeked in once, just to check. He was sitting under his desk, flashlight clamped between his teeth, hands deep in a tangle of wires, muttering to himself. Not gibberish. Not baby talk. But things like, "The panel only gets 4.2 volts now, so I need a boost converter, maybe if I reroute the storage cell through the diode first." Sarah stared for a second, heart pounding. She didn't understand a word of it. But she knew what she was seeing. It wasn't a phase. It wasn't pretend. It was real. The next morning, Max showed her a new drawing. More detailed than anything he'd made before. A small device, no bigger than a lunchbox, with 2 retractable solar panels and a USB output labeled, "For Mommy's phone." He pointed to it. "This one's real now." Sarah knelt down. "Is this the Sunbug?" Max nodded. "I used the round cells from the garden lights and the circuit from Jeremy's toaster. It gets tired when the clouds come, but I'm fixing that." Sarah laughed softly, trying not to cry. This was more than a project. It was a gift. A little boy who couldn't always say how he felt had just built her a power source. Because she was tired. Because he noticed. Later that day, while Max was at preschool and Sarah was home alone, she tiptoed into his room and opened the sketchbook again. She flipped to the last page. In Max's unsteady handwriting, surrounded by stars and lightning bolts, were the words. I'm going to light up the dark. She pressed the book to her chest and whispered to the quiet room. Baby, you already have. The first time Max got in trouble at school, it wasn't for fighting. It wasn't for yelling or throwing toys or pushing another kid off the slide. No, Max Carter got in trouble for rewiring the class fish tank filter. It started with a hum. A low, rattling noise that came from the back of the preschool classroom, just behind the snack table. The fish tank had been making that sound for weeks, but nobody had gotten around to fixing it. Nobody, except Max. He'd been watching it. Every day. Tuning into the way it vibrated just a little too much, the way the bubble stream sputtered when the motor kicked on. No one else noticed. But Max did. On a quiet Tuesday, while the rest of the kids were coloring pumpkins for the fall display, Max slipped away from his table. He grabbed a Phillips screwdriver from the fix-it, play kit and walked right over to the tank. In under 5 minutes, he had the back panel open and the motor exposed. Another 4 minutes, and he had removed a corroded wire and swapped it with one from an old computer fan he'd stashed in his backpack. The hum disappeared. The water ran silent. The fish swam calmer. Max smiled. But by then, it was too late. Miss Larson had seen him. Maxwell Carter. What do you think you're doing? Her voice cracked like a whip through the classroom. Max froze. He didn't answer, he rarely did when he felt cornered. Instead, he looked down at the wires in his hand, then back at the now silent filter. He expected her to be impressed. Or at least curious. She wasn't. You could have electrocuted yourself, she snapped. That's extremely dangerous. Max flinched but didn't speak. Because he had checked the voltage. Twice. And he had worn the rubber-tipped gloves he kept in his bag, just in case. But he didn't know how to explain all that to someone who wasn't listening. Later that day, Sarah was called into the school. Again. Miss Larson sat across from her in the cramped administrative office, arms folded, lips tight. Your son, she began, needs boundaries. He doesn't seem to understand that rules exist for a reason. Sarah, already exhausted from her overnight shift and running on 3 hours of sleep, blinked slowly. He was trying to fix the filter, wasn't he? That's not the point. Sarah's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. What is the point, then? Miss Larson leaned in, lowering her voice like she was about to reveal a conspiracy. Max is different. I know you see it. He's not like the other children. Sarah sat up straighter. He's not supposed to be like the other children. That may be, the teacher said tightly, but we have a curriculum to follow. And Max is disruptive. Sarah looked over at the principal, who had been sitting silently the whole time. He avoided her gaze. I'm not asking you to change the curriculum, she said calmly. I'm asking you to recognize that my son sees the world differently. That's not a threat, it's a gift. Miss Larson forced a smile. Not everyone sees it that way. That night, Sarah didn't tell Max about the meeting. She just hugged him tighter during story time, even when he squirmed away. He didn't ask why. But before bed, he looked up and said softly, I wasn't trying to be bad. Sarah kissed his forehead. I know, baby. You weren't. The next morning, Max didn't want to go to school. That was a first. He sat on the edge of his bed, hoodie sleeves covering his hands, eyes locked on the carpet. I don't like it there, he said. Sarah knelt beside him. Why not? They say I'm wrong. You're not wrong. They don't want me to fix things. Sarah paused. Maybe they just don't understand how special you are yet. Max looked up. Then maybe I should stop showing them. Those words hit Sarah like a punch to the heart. Because that's how it starts, isn't it? Genius doesn't disappear overnight, it hides. It learns to shrink. To stay quiet. To fit in. And Sarah couldn't let that happen. That same day, she called Jeremy. Hey, she said, what do you know about science fairs? Too much, he replied. Why? Because I think it's time Max showed the world what he can really do. On his terms. Jeremy chuckled. You're going to drop a 4-year-old into a science fair with middle schoolers. I'm going to let him be seen. Even if they don't believe him. Sarah smiled. Especially then. Back at school, Max was quieter than usual. He didn't play. He didn't build. He didn't draw any new schematics in his notebook. But while the other kids were making hand turkeys for Thanksgiving, Max scribbled one line at the top of his sketchpad. If they don't understand the light, I'll just make it brighter. Miss Larson didn't believe in Max. But Sarah did. And soon, the rest of the world would have no choice. To Max, time didn't move in hours or minutes. It moved in iterations. Each version of the sun bug was a new attempt at saying something he couldn't quite find the words for. He didn't draw hearts or write love notes. Max Carter soldered circuits and whispered, I love you, with lithium-ion batteries and microcontrollers. His workshop, formerly known as his bedroom, looked more like a startup garage than a child's room. The toy chest. Now storage for copper wire, relays, and screwdrivers. The bookshelf. Replaced by salvaged solar cells and capacitors labeled in crayon. The floor. A battlefield of trial and error. Sunbug version 1.0 was rough. It buzzed. It smoked. It melted a pencil. Sarah had rushed in, a towel in one hand and the fire extinguisher in the other. Max. It's okay, he said calmly, pointing at the smoke curling from a capacitor. Just too much power to the coil. Max, it caught fire. He looked up. But the light turned on first. She paused. It had turned on. After that, Max made notes. Too hot. Smaller capacitor. Airflow needed. Sunbug version 1.1 had fans. Tiny ones pulled from an old Xbox and powered with juicebox batteries. It didn't catch fire this time, but it barely generated enough power to light up a toy LED. Max frowned. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Sarah tried to help. She brought home extra flashlight parts from the hospital's lost and found. Old chargers. A cracked solar garden stake. Even Jeremy got involved, digging through boxes in his garage for anything Max might want. This kid's gonna out-invent Musk before he learns cursive, Jeremy muttered one evening as Max disassembled a handheld vacuum on the living room floor. Sarah smirked. That's the plan. Sunbug version 1.3 used parts from the vacuum. It actually worked, for a few seconds. A soft hum. A blink. Then, pop. Max stared at the smoking circuit. Jeremy winced. Oof. But Max didn't cry. He didn't throw the thing across the room or storm off. He just calmly reached for a new piece of paper, drew a circle around the failed design, and wrote. Try again. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed over her chest. This wasn't play anymore. It was obsession. But it was productive obsession. Focused. Deliberate. Methodical. He wasn't copying a tutorial. He was inventing. Each new Sunbug version came with upgrades. A better solar panel salvaged from an old calculator. A voltage regulator, Jeremy explained once, which Max immediately understood. A recycled USB port, mounted carefully on a piece of Legos and labeled charge. And still, it wasn't enough. He needed more energy. More time in the sun. More output. So Max started testing locations. He kept a notebook titled, Sun Tests. Front porch, 2 hours equals 30% charge. Jeremy's roof, 2 hours equals 50%. On top of the mailbox. 3 hours equals 70%. His handwriting was crooked, but the math? Flawless. Then came the breakthrough. Sunbug version 2.0. 2 solar wings made from flexible panels Jeremy found at a salvage auction. Max attached them to a folding mechanism built from coat hangers and binder clips. It looked like a beetle. But when the sun hit it just right, the wings opened. The core began to hum. And for the first time ever, a steady green light pulsed on the USB module. Max plugged in Sarah's phone. It charged. Not fast. But it worked. Max clapped once. Just once. His version of a celebration. Then he scribbled across the sketchbook in blocky letters. It's real. That night, Sarah found the device sitting on her desk next to a note. The note simply said, "For when the lights go out. So you're never alone in the dark." She didn't cry. She ugly cried. Because what kind of 4-year-old builds a personal power grid to protect his mom? The kind no one ever sees coming. That weekend, Jeremy helped Max mount the Sunbug to a backpack. The wings folded in. The charging port sat neatly inside a water bottle pocket. Max wore it around the neighborhood like a mission pack. The neighborhood kids pointed. Laughed. One called him Backpack Buzz Lightyear. Max didn't respond. He just turned his back to the sun, stood still for 6 minutes, then plugged in a flashlight and turned it on. Light. From nothing but sunlight. They stopped laughing. Later that night, as Max sketched out Sunbug version 2.1, he asked Sarah without looking up. "Do you think the sun ever gets tired?" She smiled. "Why would it?" "Because it's always giving." Sarah leaned down, kissed the top of his messy hair, and whispered. "Maybe. But that's why people like you exist, to give back." Max nodded once. Then flipped to the next page. Sunbug version 3.0. Bigger. Better. Brighter. He was just getting started. The gym smelled like glue sticks, nervous sweat, and a suspicious amount of glitter. Sarah Carter clutched her coffee and tried to act like she wasn't completely out of place. Most of the parents wore smart casual outfits and carried clipboards like they'd just come from a PTA meeting. Sarah wore sneakers, an old hoodie, and bags under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. This was the District Youth Tech Showcase, a citywide science fair open to kids ages 5 to 13. Max was 4. And he was the only one with solar-powered wings strapped to his back. They had to fudge his age a bit on the registration form. Sarah listed him as 5, with a little smile and a silent prayer. Jeremy carried in Max's folding table and custom-built cardboard trifold, while Max rolled in the newest version of the Sunbug on a wheeled dolly made from an old Roomba chassis. The device looked sleeker than ever, matte black casing, dual solar wings, a functioning USB-C output, and a tiny LED screen that displayed real-time voltage readings. The boy had built a power source. A real one. Sarah looked around at the competition, baking soda volcanoes, potato clocks, an app that reminded you to drink water. All great. But not this. Not him. Max didn't speak much that morning. He just set up his station with mechanical precision, organizing his tools, lining up his schematics, adjusting the solar wings until they caught the best light streaming through the gym windows. His sign, in crooked block letters, read, "Sunbug, clean energy anywhere." By Max Carter, age 4-ish. Some parents walked by and smiled indulgently. Others frowned. And one, a man in a polo shirt with Jackson middle stem embroidered on the chest, looked annoyed. He leaned over to Sarah and said with a tight smile, "So, your son built all this?" "Yup," Sarah replied, trying not to sound defensive. The man raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. My daughter Emily spent 3 months building a hydrodynamic algae pump. But sure, solar bug. Neat." He walked away before she could answer. Jeremy, standing nearby, muttered, "Can I punch that guy?" "No," Sarah whispered, "but write his name down in case I ever write a memoir." The judges arrived an hour later. 3 adults, one from a local college, one from a renewable energy nonprofit, and one who looked like he thought STEM meant sugar, tea, eggs, and milk. Max didn't blink. He pulled out his diagrams, showed off the sunbug's folding mechanism, ran a live demo charging a portable fan, and even explained the voltage limiter he'd added to prevent battery swelling. The judge from the nonprofit leaned over and whispered to the others, "This is, actually brilliant." The man from the college just nodded, speechless. The third judge, still chewing gum, said, "Does it come in pink?" Max stared. Sarah stepped in with a forced laugh. "We're working on it." Things were going too well. Until Emily Jackson showed up. She was 11. Confident. Polished. And clearly used to winning. Her algae pump stood on a custom pedestal next to a slideshow of graphs and bar charts. Her dad, the same smug guy from earlier, was practically coaching her through every line. When she and Max were placed in the same judging group, you could feel the tension shift. Sarah felt it too. And she saw the way Mr. Jackson looked at Max's station. Not curious. Calculating. What happened next still makes Sarah's stomach twist. It was near the end of judging, while Max was in the bathroom with Jeremy. Sarah was packing up some wires when she saw Mr. Jackson lean over Max's station. His hands moved too quickly. Too intentionally. She blinked. It happened in seconds. By the time Max returned, the sun bug didn't turn on. Max's face went pale. He checked every wire. The battery. The board. Nothing. The LED display was blank. Dead. Sarah knelt down beside him. "It's okay, baby. We'll figure it out." But Max's hands were shaking. He knew it had been tampered with. He just didn't know how. And he didn't have time to fix it before the judges circled back. The moment was crushing. The judges returned, asked for one last demo, and all Max could do was stammer, "It was working before." They nodded politely. Took notes. Moved on. Max stood completely still. Then slowly pulled the wings off his back, packed up the pieces, and sat behind the table. Silent. Defeated. Sarah's chest burned. Not just with anger, but with heartbreak. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just dimmed. After the fair, while the winners were announced and Emily Jackson stood on stage with a blue ribbon and a victory grin, Max walked out of the gym without saying a word. Sarah and Jeremy followed in silence. At the car, Max finally whispered, "I should have made it harder to break." Sarah hugged him tight. "You shouldn't have to." That night, after Max went to bed early, Sarah sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, trying to find any way to prove what had happened. No luck. No footage. No witnesses. But something else did show up. An email. From one of the judges. Subject, Sunbug Project. From, Dr. Karen.Lee@greenfuture.org. Hi Sarah. I just wanted to reach out and say that your son's project was one of the most original ideas I've seen in years. Regardless of the final judging outcome, I'd love to talk more. I think Max has something very, very special. Best. Dr. Karen Lee. Sarah stared at the screen. Then looked toward Max's room. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Jeremy didn't post the video out of revenge. He posted it out of heartbreak. The footage wasn't even that long, maybe 45 seconds. Just a shaky clip he'd taken on his phone during the fair, showing Max in his oversized hoodie, quietly explaining the sunbug to the judges. His hands moved fast but precisely. His voice was soft, but clear. And then the wings open when the sunlight hits the panel, so it can power phones or fans or whatever. Even during a blackout. At the end of the video, Jeremy had added a caption. This is Max. He's 4. He built a solar-powered generator by himself. He didn't win the science fair. But maybe he should win something bigger. He posted it on TikTok with the hashtag #SunbugKid. Then he put his phone down, made himself a ham sandwich, and went to bed. By the time Jeremy woke up the next morning, the video had 2.3 million views. By lunchtime, it had 7 million. By 3 p.m., Sunbug Kid was trending on Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram. Someone had made a remix of Max explaining the solar panel, auto-tuned over a lo-fi beat. By 6 p.m., Sarah's inbox was flooded. Emails. DM requests. Media inquiries. Good Morning America. The Today Show. CNN. BuzzFeed. A random podcast from Norway. And, a message marked, confidential, Tesla media team. Sarah stared at it in disbelief. Meanwhile, Max was in his room, tinkering with Sunbug version 3.2 like none of this was happening. Because to him, it wasn't about views or hashtags or going viral. It was about the work. He wanted it to be better. He wanted it to matter. When Sarah told him he was famous, he didn't look up. He just asked, did they fix the fish tank yet? That evening, a package arrived. No return label. Just a sleek black box and a tiny card. Max. The world needs minds like yours. Keep building. EM. Inside the box. A brand new Raspberry Pi 5. A flexible solar mat. A wireless oscilloscope. And a custom Tesla hoodie in kid size. Max held it up, inspecting the stitching. Then whispered, "It's so soft." Sarah blinked. "Do you know who sent that?" Max shrugged. "Elon, maybe." Like he was talking about a neighbor. Overnight, the Carter apartment turned into mission control. Jeremy helped set up interviews. Sarah set up a Gmail folder called People Who Want to Talk to Max. And Max kept building. One comment from a retired engineer read, "I've worked on solar tech for 20 years. This kid is doing things some college students can't." Another said, "Not even Elon Musk was building power stations at age 4. People began to ask, "Where can I buy a Sunbug? Can Max do a tutorial? Is he a robot?" Sarah tried to keep it together. She refused to let Max near the comments section. Instead, she made a deal. For every interview he agreed to, she'd buy him one weird part from eBay. So far, he'd asked for a mini wind turbine, 2 broken drone motors, a bar of gallium, and something called a Peltier cooler, which he pronounced Pelchi's thing. Then came the message that changed everything. It was a Zoom request from Dr. Karen Lee, the same science fair judge who had emailed after the sabotage. Sarah clicked accept. Karen appeared on screen, smiling warmly. "Hi Sarah." "Hi Max." Max waved absently while drawing a circuit on his whiteboard. "I just wanted to say, your son's invention inspired something. We showed the Sunbug video at our board meeting this morning. There's talk about launching a Youth Innovator grant. Sarah leaned in. Like, a scholarship? More than that, Karen said. Funding. Mentorship. A full prototype development lab. A space where Max can work safely, with experts around to support, not stifle, him. Sarah's jaw dropped. You're serious? Karen nodded. We don't want to change who he is. We just want to help him go further. When the call ended, Max finally looked up. Can I still build at home too? Sarah smiled. Always. Max nodded, satisfied. Okay. Then they can help. By the next day, the Sunbug wasn't just a project. It was a movement. DIY solar forums were reverse engineering Max's design based on screenshots from the video. Engineers from India, Brazil, and Kenya posted ideas for expanding the concept to help rural communities. A woman in Texas tagged Sarah on Instagram with a photo. Made my own Sunbug from junkyard parts. Charged my phone during a power outage. Thank you, Max. But while the internet exploded with admiration, Mr. Jackson fumed in silence. His daughter Emily, blue ribbon and all, had barely cracked 300 views on her algae pump demo. And now, his moment in the spotlight had been stolen, by a 4-year-old in a hoodie and Velcro shoes. He wasn't done. Not yet. That night, as Max sat on the windowsill watching the sun go down, he turned to Sarah. Do you think I'm gonna have to talk in front of people? Sarah laughed. Probably. He sighed. Can I just build instead? You can do both, she said. And if you get nervous, I'll stand next to you. Max was quiet for a moment. Then whispered. Okay. But I still want to make the Sunbug fly next. Sarah blinked. Fly. Max smiled. Yeah. Like a real bug. And just like that, everything leveled up again. Max's name was everywhere now. It was hard to keep track of how many times Sarah had heard Sunbug in a conversation that day. The news outlets, podcasts, and even late-night hosts couldn't stop talking about the 4-year-old with a DIY solar-powered generator. Max had become a symbol, not just of innovation, but of a new generation of thinkers who didn't wait for the world to catch up. And, of course, people wanted a piece of him. The first offer came through an Instagram message. It was from a startup in Silicon Valley. Hey Sarah, we're huge fans of Max's work. We'd love to talk about a potential partnership to expand the Sunbug. We can help with funding, development, and distribution. What do you think? Sarah was skeptical. A partnership? Just like that? It felt too easy. She responded with a cautious, let's talk, and scheduled a call for the following afternoon. That night, Jeremy made another batch of popcorn and put it in a bowl that Max was too busy to notice. They gathered around the TV to watch the news. The Sunbug story had become the feel-good piece of the week. The only problem? There was a glaring omission. No one had mentioned the sabotage. It was all glossed over. The media didn't care about the why, they cared about the how. Max had created something, and that was all that mattered. The story was already shifting from a tale of a kid genius to a new Tesla kid, with the potential to be bigger than that guy from Shark Tank who kept sending Max messages with emojis of fire and thumbs up. When Sarah tried to ask Max how he felt about everything, he just shrugged. Can I build my flying Sunbug tomorrow? The call with the Silicon Valley startup came as scheduled. The CEO, a man named David Cross, was enthusiastic. Too enthusiastic. Sarah, we absolutely love what Max has done. He's a true prodigy. We'd love to work with him to scale this thing up. Our company has the resources, the connections, the engineers. We can take the Sunbug from a DIY project to a global product. Think of it, solar power for everyone, everywhere. No more battery shortages, no more blackouts. Sarah, ever the skeptic, asked, but what's the catch? David laughed. No catch, just opportunity. We've got investors lined up, and we think Max is the perfect face for this. Imagine him presenting at tech conferences, at UN climate summits. He could be the next Elon Musk. The word Elon Musk hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. It was flattering, sure, but also terrifying. And in exchange for that, she asked, her voice steady but with an edge. What would you want from us? David hesitated for a moment, then answered, we'd like to take full control of Sunbug's development. You'd have a say, of course, but we'll manage the design, marketing, and licensing. And, this is key, we'd like to take Max on as a long-term brand ambassador for our company. Sarah's heart raced. The pieces were falling into place. They were offering everything. But at what price? Later that night, Jeremy sat with her on the couch, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. Is this really happening? He asked, disbelief still in his voice. This is like a dream. They want Max. I don't know, Jeremy, she replied, rubbing her forehead. It sounds great, but it doesn't feel right. They want control. They want him to be the face of something they can profit from. You think it's all just business? I think it's too good to be true, Sarah said. I want Max to succeed. I do. But I also want him to have the freedom to create. Not just be a brand. Jeremy sighed. I get it. But they're talking about big money here. Big impact. If we say no, someone else will take it. And they'll control everything from the start. She didn't respond right away. The weight of the decision was suffocating. Max walked into the living room then, holding a model Sunbug in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. I made a flying one, he announced. Can I try it out tomorrow? Both of them looked at him, this child who was somehow both innocent and brilliant, unaware of the adult decisions hanging over him. Decisions that would define his future. Max tilted his head, sensing the tension. Are we going to make the Sunbug fly for real? Sarah forced a smile. Not yet, buddy. But we'll get there. We just need to figure a few things out first. The next morning, as Sarah pondered the offer over coffee, another email arrived. This one was from Tesla Media Team. The subject line read: Max Carter, invitation for a meeting with Elon Musk. She froze. Not again, she whispered to herself, rubbing her eyes. She opened the email with a hesitant hand. Dear Sarah. After seeing Max's impressive work, we'd like to extend an invitation for you and Max to meet with Elon Musk to discuss a potential partnership. Tesla's commitment to sustainable energy aligns perfectly with the goals Max has set with Sunbug. We're eager to talk. Please let us know if you're available next week. The message was signed, Tesla PR Team. The universe was clearly not going to give Sarah a moment's peace. Max's inventions had caught the attention of tech moguls and corporate giants alike. The world was now watching a 4-year-old who had more potential than anyone could fathom. And the deals were flooding in, each one more tempting than the last. But Sarah couldn't help but wonder, how much was too much? How much control was she willing to give up for the sake of success? Would she be sacrificing Max's innocence, his creativity, his future, just to have him branded by some corporate logo? It was the deal of a lifetime, and yet it felt like a trap. That afternoon, after Max finished tinkering with his flying Sunbug prototype, an idea he came up with out of nowhere, Sarah sat him down. Max, she said, I need you to promise me something. If all this, everything that's happening, ever feels wrong or too much, I want you to tell me, okay? Max looked up at her, his eyes wide with seriousness. I promise, Mom. She smiled, ruffling his messy hair. Good. Because whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. We're in this as a team. Always. Max nodded. Team Sunbug. The world had turned its gaze upon Max Carter, and with it came the kind of attention number 4-year-old, no person, really, could ever fully be prepared for. Every day brought something new. An interview here, a press conference there. Even Jeremy started fielding calls from people he never thought would know his name, PR specialists, managers, and even talent scouts. They wanted Max. They wanted the Sunbug Kid. They wanted the next big thing. But as they sat in the conference room with the Tesla PR team, Max, Jeremy, Sarah, and a couple of their lawyers, the room felt different. The bright lights of the media spotlight were no longer just an exciting buzz. They were blinding. And the walls of the room, lined with sleek glass windows and corporate gloss, felt like they were closing in. Sarah couldn't shake the thought, are we in over our heads? Elon Musk wasn't there. But the representatives were. They all sat in expensive suits, exuding that corporate confidence that Sarah had seen too many times in movies, but never up close. They introduced themselves with practiced smiles, shaking hands and sliding contracts across the table with the ease of people who had made deals like this 1,000 times. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Carter," said Jason, the lead negotiator, a tall man with sharp eyes. "We've all seen Max's incredible work with Sunbug. At Tesla, we believe his innovation could truly revolutionize energy distribution in underserved areas. We'd like to help him take this to the next level." Sarah glanced at Max, who was sitting quietly beside her, his attention flicking between the various gadgets on the conference table. He was playing with a miniature Tesla model car, clearly unaware of the high-stakes conversation happening around him. "We're excited by the potential," Sarah replied carefully, "but we want to make sure that Max's work, his vision, remains his own. We've been very careful about maintaining creative control." Jason leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Of course, Ms. Carter, of course. We respect that. Max's creativity is a huge part of what makes him special." He looked at her with an almost fatherly smile. "But let's not kid ourselves. Max's talents could reach millions, even billions. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We'd like to take things further. If we're talking about a partnership with Tesla, we need to make sure the product is scalable, efficient. And we have a team of experts who can help refine Max's design." Sarah's stomach churned. She could see where this was going. "You're asking us to hand over control of Sunbug's development," she said flatly, her voice tight. Jason didn't blink. "Not at all. What we're offering is collaboration. Tesla's resources can help make this vision a reality. And in return, we'd like a percentage of the intellectual property rights. We can't sign anything unless we're involved in the design and distribution process, of course." It wasn't the money that bothered Sarah. It was the control. It always came down to control. Max, still twirling his car in his small hands, looked up. "Do I get to drive the car when we're done?" The question was innocent, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Everyone in the room paused for a moment. Sarah smiled, trying to regain a bit of normalcy. "Not yet, buddy. But I promise we'll get there." As the conversation continued, the words began to blur together. Terms like equity stake, licensing, and exclusive distribution rights felt more like a foreign language than anything that concerned Max and Sarah. Jason and his colleagues explained everything in such polished, calculated terms that it was hard to know where the business ended and where their moral compass began. The meeting stretched on for what felt like hours. By the time they finished, the offer on the table was monumental. Tesla wanted to partner with Max and Sunbug, not only providing funding but offering their full infrastructure, factories, engineers, distribution networks, and a platform to scale. The deal was incredibly generous, more money than Sarah had ever dreamed of. But there was a price. Jason had made it clear. In exchange for all Tesla's resources, they'd want control over the direction of the project. Max would be the face of it, the public figure representing Tesla's new generation of sustainable technology. They wanted him in their marketing, their campaigns, their schools and conferences. To Max, it all seemed like a huge adventure. To Sarah, the weight of the decision was heavier than ever. As they left the Tesla offices, the quiet of the evening felt deafening. "Mom?" Max asked, tugging at her sleeve. "Do I get to keep the car?" Sarah smiled weakly. "We'll see, buddy." Jeremy looked over at her, his face unreadable. "So? What now?" "I don't know," Sarah replied softly. "I don't know if we can sign that. It's not just about money. It's about what they want to do with Max's future. What they want to turn him into." Jeremy was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Max is the future. They know that. And if we say no, there's a chance someone else, someone without our values, could come in and control everything. We'd lose Max's vision, everything we've fought for." "I know," Sarah said quietly, "but I'm scared, Jeremy. What if this changes him? What if he's not a kid anymore? What if he just becomes a brand?" "Maybe we can find a middle ground," Jeremy suggested, though even he didn't sound convinced. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, her mind raced. Elon Musk himself had personally shown interest in Max's project. Tesla, the biggest name in renewable energy, wanted in. The numbers were astronomical. The potential was limitless. But at what cost? Max's future was a blank page, and every decision Sarah made seemed to add another line to that story. Was she writing the story she wanted for him? Or was she just a spectator, watching as the world tried to rewrite his destiny? The next morning, she received another email. This time, it was from the other company who had reached out to her earlier, the one from Silicon Valley. They had upped their offer. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Max didn't understand why everyone was acting so stressed. To him, life had never been more exciting. His Sunbug prototype was a success. It had made headlines, captured the hearts of millions, and now the world was buzzing with offers from some of the biggest names in tech. He had been building his little solar-powered cars in the garage, and now he was a star. His favorite part? All the toys. The shiny Tesla model cars that were now his to play with, the new drone his mom had promised he could use once they finished the next model. Everything was new, everything was fresh, and he couldn't wait to see where this adventure would go next. But Sarah? She could barely sleep. Every night, the weight of her decisions pressed down on her chest like a 100-pound rock. The email from the Silicon Valley startup had come in with an offer so massive that it made the Tesla deal seem like pocket change. "We can help you scale Max's project, we have connections at the highest levels of government and private sectors. We can make Sunbug the most profitable venture in the world. Here's what we're offering. $10 million upfront for development costs. Exclusive partnership rights for the first 5 years. Full funding to create a full product line for Sunbug, including solar-powered cars, home systems, and more. Full access to government green energy grants." It was overwhelming. They wanted control, but they also promised to protect Max's legacy. The email made it sound like they were doing Sarah a favor by offering such a generous deal, but something about it didn't sit right. The numbers were too big, the promises too smooth. It felt like a trap. A gilded cage. The family sat around the kitchen table that morning, the papers spread out in front of them. "Sarah," Jeremy started, "this is the kind of money that could change everything for us. This could secure Max's future. This could change the world." Sarah glanced at the paper, then at Max, who was spinning one of his tiny Sunbug prototypes between his hands. "Change the world," she repeated quietly. "But at what cost? They want to control the product, control him." Jeremy sighed, rubbing his temples. "Control is part of the deal. No one gives something for nothing. They're offering us what they think we want, what they think Max deserves." And what do we want? Sarah asked, her voice rising just a little. I'm not sure this is the right thing for Max. I'm not sure we know what we're getting ourselves into. Max, who had been completely engrossed in the spinning of his sun bug, suddenly looked up. Mom, can I make it go faster? I want to race it with the other cars. For a moment, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Maybe after breakfast, buddy. But then her smile faded as she looked at the papers in front of her again. Jeremy leaned forward, his face intense. We could say no, Sarah. But if we do, what happens then? What's next? We don't have the connections. We don't have the resources. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. Is it? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Or is this the moment we sell out? That evening, they were invited to a private dinner with David Cross from the Silicon Valley startup. The dinner was held at an upscale restaurant, and as they entered, they were greeted like royalty. David, an older man with a salt and pepper beard and a booming laugh, was already seated with a glass of wine in hand. His charisma was undeniable. He didn't even try to hide his excitement as he ushered them to the table. Sarah. Jeremy. Max, he greeted warmly. We're thrilled to have you here. I've been following Max's work for months, and I have to say, it's incredible. What you've done is exactly what the world needs. Sarah nodded, unsure of how to respond. Thank you. David didn't waste any time. He laid out the proposal in person, his voice confident, almost slick. We want to take Max's sun bug to the next level, he said, his eyes glinting with excitement. We'll give you the funding, the development team, the infrastructure. We'll push Max's product into every home, every business, and every community that needs it. And, of course, he'll be the face of the revolution. He'll be the one driving this change. Max, sitting in his chair and poking at the mashed potatoes in front of him, was only half listening. I like making my sun bug go fast. Can we make it fly too? David chuckled, though it seemed forced. We can definitely make it fly, Max. Anything is possible with the right resources. But Sarah wasn't fooled. She could see it in David's eyes, he didn't care about Max's dreams. He cared about Max as a commodity, a product to be sold. Max wasn't just a kid to him, he was an investment. The evening dragged on as they discussed the details of the deal. The more Sarah listened, the more uneasy she became. It wasn't just the money or the promises of fame. It was the way David spoke about Max's potential, like he was a prize to be won. She caught herself staring at her son, watching him push around his food and occasionally glance up with wide, innocent eyes. This wasn't just about technology. It was about his childhood. His future. His identity. Later that night, as they sat in their hotel room, Sarah could no longer keep it inside. Jeremy, she whispered, this feels wrong. I thought we could handle this, but it's starting to feel like we're losing him. I don't know how much more we can take. Jeremy was silent for a long moment. I know. I get it. But Max is changing the world, Sarah. And we're right here with him. If we don't take these opportunities, someone else will. And we'll be left behind. That's just it, Sarah said, her voice breaking. If we take these opportunities, we might lose everything that made him Max. The next morning, Sarah was on the phone with a lawyer, going over the fine print of the contracts again. But the words blurred together. Everything felt blurry. She wanted to do the right thing. She had to do the right thing. But what was the right thing? Was it protecting Max from the world's pressures? Or was it helping him reach his potential, even if it meant making compromises along the way? As Sarah stared out the window, the answer seemed clearer than ever before. It was a quiet morning when Sarah woke up. The kind of morning where the world felt like it was holding its breath, as if waiting for something to change. And maybe it was. Max was still sleeping, his small body curled up under the blankets, a slight frown on his face as if he were caught in the midst of some dream he couldn't shake. She watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and fear. He had no idea what was coming. No idea that the world outside that bedroom door was already trying to shape his future. But Sarah did. Jeremy was already awake, standing by the window, his hand pressed against the glass as he stared out at the city below. He looked lost in thought, as if he was trying to process everything they had been through, the offers, the media frenzy, the promises from tech giants, and now the weight of their decision. The weight of Max's future. "I don't know how to do this, Sarah," Jeremy said quietly, not turning around. "I don't know what the right thing is." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She simply watched him. Her mind had been racing since their dinner with David Cross, since the Silicon Valley startup's offer, since the night she couldn't sleep and kept running through all the scenarios in her head. Every possible outcome. Every possible price. Max was a gift, a miracle. But sometimes, she wondered if he was also a ticking time bomb. They had to make a choice. And soon. The phone call came at 9:30 a.m. It was from Jason, the lead negotiator at Tesla. Sarah had been expecting it. She had been expecting calls from all directions, but this one felt heavier than the rest. "Ms. Carter," Jason's voice crackled through the speaker, "I wanted to follow up on our last meeting. We understand you've been considering our proposal, and I wanted to assure you, Max's involvement with Tesla will be one of the most important projects we've ever undertaken. We can make him the face of our next generation of sustainable technology." Sarah's heart pounded as she gripped the phone tighter. "And what does that mean for Max?" she asked, her voice low. Jason's response was smooth, like a practiced salesman who knew exactly how to get under her skin. "It means a future where Max has the support he needs to change the world. We'll provide him with the resources, the funding, the exposure. It's an unparalleled opportunity." Her hand shook. "I understand. But what happens to his vision? What happens to the soul of Sunbug?" There was a long pause, as if Jason was choosing his words carefully. "Max will be the face of this new movement, Ms. Carter. But this is bigger than one person. This is about creating a legacy, a sustainable future. We can help him reach heights that no one else can." Sarah didn't even realize she had dropped the phone until it hit the floor with a dull thud. She sank into the nearest chair, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on her. Max was supposed to be Max. He wasn't supposed to be a figurehead. He wasn't supposed to be a pawn in some tech giant's game. But there it was. A choice between the security of Max's future and the preservation of his identity. Tesla could make them wealthy beyond belief, they could change the world, but at what cost? And the other deal from Silicon Valley? It wasn't much better. They promised to protect Max's legacy, but Sarah wasn't convinced. She'd seen too many young talents get swept up in the machine, only to lose themselves in the process. When Max woke up, he was his usual, cheerful self. But when he walked into the living room, he found his parents sitting on the couch, staring at the same papers, the same contracts, the same emails that had been haunting them for days. Max plopped down between them, still holding his favorite Sunbug prototype in his hands. "Are we gonna make it fly yet, Mommy? I want to see it go really high." Sarah's heart twisted at the innocence in his voice. She reached out and placed her hand gently on his head, smoothing his messy hair. "We'll get there, buddy," she whispered. Max turned to Jeremy, his big brown eyes full of hope. "Daddy, you said we were gonna make it fly, right?" Jeremy's expression softened. He nodded slowly, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. "We'll figure it out, Max, don't worry about it." The decision was looming over them like a dark cloud. The weight of it pressed down on every conversation, every quiet moment, every decision they made. Sarah couldn't breathe. She felt trapped between the two worlds, the world where she protected her son, kept him grounded, let him be a kid, and the world where she could offer him everything he could ever want, everything he deserved. A chance to change the world, to be part of something bigger than himself. But the bigger it got, the more she feared that Max would slip through her fingers. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery, a small package addressed to Max. The package was from Tesla. Inside was a miniature Tesla car, a symbol of what could be. A gift, a gesture, or maybe a reminder of what was at stake. Max didn't even think twice before running to the box, tearing it open, and pulling out the shiny new toy car. He immediately began zooming it around the room, laughing as he pretended it was a sunbug. His joy was contagious, and for a moment, Sarah allowed herself to forget about the weight of the world outside. She smiled, watching him. But that smile quickly faded. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? Max didn't know what was happening. He didn't know that every day was a new hurdle, a new choice to make. He didn't understand that the world was coming at him with full force, and in this world, he could either rise or be consumed. And as a mother, Sarah had to decide if she would let him rise, or if she would protect him from it all. Later that night, Sarah stood alone in the kitchen, staring out the window. Jeremy was on the phone, likely negotiating more details with someone from Tesla or the startup. She didn't know anymore. The lines were blurring. The people were all the same. They all wanted one thing, Max. And now, it was her job to decide what was best for him. It had never been about the money. But as Sarah stood there, it was clear that the choices were no longer simple. It wasn't just about protecting Max from the world, it was about protecting his future. But which future? The one where he was a kid, or the one where he was a legend? The crossroads had arrived. The weight of the decision was unbearable. Sarah lay awake in the middle of the night, her thoughts racing, replaying every conversation, every email, every offer. They were on the brink of something massive, something life-changing, but every new step felt like a betrayal. Max was supposed to be a child, not a brand, not a tool for someone else's empire. She rolled over to face Jeremy, who was lying next to her, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. He'd been awake too, the same thoughts weighing on him. They didn't even need to speak, the silence between them said everything. They were both terrified. "Jeremy, what if we're making a mistake?" Sarah whispered, breaking the stillness. Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "What if we're doing this for the wrong reasons?" Jeremy shifted, turning toward her. He exhaled sharply, as though the very question had been gnawing at him for days. "I don't know anymore, Sarah. I don't know what the right answer is. Every time I think I have it figured out, another offer comes through, another opportunity opens up. It feels like we can't escape it." She closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. What if it's not about escaping it? What if it's about protecting him from it all? From becoming just another product? The next morning was no better. Sarah barely touched her coffee, and Max, oblivious to the storm brewing around him, chattered happily about his new Tesla toy car. He made racing sounds as he zoomed it across the kitchen table, but it was hard for Sarah to focus on his excitement when her mind was consumed by the looming decision. Jeremy sat at the table across from her, his phone in hand, scrolling through messages. He had an unread email from Jason at Tesla and another from David Cross, offering even more money. Every new message was another crack in their already fragile foundation. "Maybe we should just take the Tesla deal," Jeremy said suddenly, his voice thick with uncertainty. "We could secure Max's future. He could change the world. We could live comfortably, have the life we've always dreamed of." Sarah's heart sank at his words. She wanted to believe that what they were doing was for Max, for his future. But every time she pictured his face, his innocent eyes, his untainted joy, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of losing him to something far bigger than themselves. "And what if that future isn't the one Max needs?" Sarah replied, her voice rising slightly. "What if we're not letting him be Max anymore? What if we're letting him become some product, some tech icon, someone we don't even recognize? Max was still playing with the Tesla car, but now his focus had shifted to the tiny Sunbug prototype, which had rolled off the table. He grabbed it, holding it up with a big grin on his face. "Look, Mommy. It's flying," he said, pretending the tiny car was soaring through the air. Sarah's chest tightened at the sight. She hadn't meant for it to happen, but Max had already come to love his invention more than anything else in the world. And that's what made the decision so painful. The world was pulling at him, demanding that he grow up faster than he should, forcing him into a role he wasn't ready for. At 3 p.m., Sarah found herself at a park, walking aimlessly through the rows of trees. She needed to clear her head. She needed to think. She couldn't do this anymore, not without a break, not without figuring out what she was willing to sacrifice. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, her stomach dropping when she saw the name on the screen. It was Jason from Tesla. She answered on the second ring. "Jason," she said, trying to sound calm. "How can I help you?" "Ms. Carter," he said with his usual polished tone, "I'm just following up on our previous conversations. We've been finalizing the details of the offer, and we'd love to set up a final meeting to go over everything in person. We believe this is the best opportunity for Max." Her fingers tightened around the phone, and she fought the urge to scream. "I've been thinking about it, Jason," she said slowly, her voice faltering. "I don't know if we're ready to sign anything just yet." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I understand. But I want to make sure you know, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. If you wait too long, someone else will come in and snatch it up." Sarah ended the call, her heart pounding. She knew she had to make a decision, but the pressure was suffocating. They couldn't keep putting it off. What if they were making the wrong choice? What if they were about to sacrifice everything that made Max who he was for the sake of money and fame? That night, as Sarah sat on the couch in a daze, Jeremy came in with a bottle of wine. He didn't say a word, just opened it and poured 2 glasses. Sarah took hers but didn't drink, staring down at the glass as if it could provide the answers she so desperately needed. "We're at a crossroads," Jeremy finally said, his voice hoarse. "We have to decide. Do we protect Max's childhood, or do we take the chance? Do we push him forward into something bigger, or do we keep him in this little bubble, safe and innocent?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had been so sure of herself at the beginning of this journey. She had thought they could navigate this, that they could shield Max from the weight of the world. But now, it felt impossible. Just then, Max came into the living room, holding up his favorite Sunbug model. "Look, Mommy. It's ready to fly," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "I can make it go super fast." Sarah could hardly breathe. Her heart ached at the sight of his face, full of hope and innocence. He didn't know what was happening, didn't understand the magnitude of the decisions they were making. She couldn't answer him. Instead, she simply pulled him into her arms and held him close. This was what mattered. This moment, right now. Not the tech giants, not the money, not the pressure. Just him. "Mommy?" Max's voice was small, his hand resting against her chest. "Are we going to make it fly? Are we going to make it real?" She closed her eyes, kissing the top of his head. "Maybe, buddy," she whispered. "Maybe we will." But at that moment, Sarah knew that the real question wasn't about making the Sunbug fly. It was about whether they could protect Max from flying too high too soon. The next day, everything seemed to change in an instant. Max woke up with the same enthusiasm as always, bouncing around the kitchen, excited about another day of tinkering with his Sunbug prototype. But the air in the house felt different, heavier somehow. It wasn't just the looming deadline, the pressure of the deals hanging over them, no, it was something more subtle. A quiet tension that had taken root in their home and was spreading with every breath. Sarah barely noticed it at first. She was too distracted by the phone call she'd received earlier, the one that had confirmed what she'd feared. Tesla had set a meeting for 10 a.m. sharp to finalize their deal. It was the offer that had been on the table for weeks, but this time it felt final. A closing of doors, a locking away of what had been their dream for Max's future. She glanced at Jeremy, who was silently looking at the contract on his phone, his face unreadable. They had been living on borrowed time, and now the reckoning was here. The meeting at Tesla's headquarters felt like an eternity. Sarah had never been to the campus before, and as they drove through the sleek gates, the pristine glass buildings seemed to mock her with their clean-cut perfection. Every corner of the campus screamed innovation, the future, the promise of something monumental. But inside, Sarah could feel the weight of the decision she had made. Max was with them, of course. He had insisted on coming along. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he bounced on his heels, oblivious to the monumental nature of this moment. He had no idea that this could be the turning point of his life, a decision that would forever alter the course of his future. Jason greeted them with his usual polished smile. "Welcome, Sarah, Jeremy, and Max," he said, his voice smooth and professional. He guided them into a sleek conference room, where representatives from Tesla sat waiting with open arms, literally. "We're excited to finally have you here in person," Jason continued. "We're ready to take things to the next level with Max. We've been following his progress, and as we've said before, we truly believe this is an unparalleled opportunity for all of us." Sarah couldn't help but feel uneasy. There was something about the way he spoke, too eager, too confident. She had the nagging feeling that they weren't just here to discuss business. They were here because they had already made up their minds about Max. As they sat down at the conference table, Max played with his Sunbug model, completely unaware of the weighty conversation happening around him. Sarah couldn't take her eyes off him. He was so small, so innocent, and yet here they were, discussing whether he should be the face of Tesla's new generation of sustainable technology. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Let's get straight to the point," Jason said, tapping a tablet in front of him. "We have the resources, the funding, the platform to make Max the most influential figure of his generation. We can't wait to see how he'll transform the future of renewable energy. And you, Sarah and Jeremy, you'll have everything you've ever dreamed of. Wealth, influence, security." Jeremy shifted in his seat, clearly intrigued, but Sarah wasn't convinced. "You're asking us to give up Max's childhood for this," she said bluntly, her voice steady but firm. "For his future, yes, but you're also asking us to change who he is. You're asking us to make him into something he's not." Jason smiled, but there was something cold behind his eyes. "Max is a special child, Sarah. You must see that. We're not asking you to change him, we're offering him a chance to amplify what he's already capable of. With the right resources, he'll have the opportunity to revolutionize the world. And with that, you both will have access to an unimaginable future." The conversation stretched on, each word a reminder of what they stood to gain. The promises were so grand, so tempting. But the more Sarah listened, the more she realized that the world they were proposing wasn't a world she wanted for Max. Not if it meant losing him in the process. As the meeting continued, Jeremy seemed to drift further into the allure of the deal. The possibilities of wealth, the fame, the potential to create a lasting legacy, it was hard for him not to be swept up in it all. Sarah, however, couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something dangerous. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the conversation ended. They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and as they walked out of the room, Jason gave one last, knowing look. "We'll send over the final paperwork, and we look forward to hearing from you soon." On the drive back home, Sarah couldn't speak. Her heart was heavy with regret, with fear. She wasn't sure what they had just signed up for, but she knew it was too much. Too fast. And what about Max? Could they really protect him from all of this? Max, for his part, was still oblivious, talking excitedly about the things he had seen at Tesla's headquarters, showing off the small gifts they had given him, more miniature Tesla cars, a t-shirt, a baseball cap. He didn't understand the significance of any of it. He was just happy to be included in something big. He didn't know that, soon enough, that happiness might come at the cost of his childhood. That night, as Sarah tucked Max into bed, she found herself unable to speak. She leaned down and kissed his forehead, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like a physical burden. "I love you, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please remember that, no matter what happens." Max smiled sleepily, his little hand reaching up to grasp hers. "I love you too, Mommy," he murmured before closing his eyes and drifting off to sleep. Later that evening, Sarah and Jeremy sat in silence in the living room. The contract was on the coffee table, the paperwork that could change everything for Max, everything for them. But the more Sarah looked at it, the more she felt like it was a chain, not an opportunity. Every page was another link, another way they could lose themselves, lose Max. Finally, Jeremy broke the silence. "We've come so far, Sarah. Maybe this is just the way things are meant to be." But Sarah wasn't sure anymore. She wasn't sure about any of it. What had they become? The next day, she made a decision. A choice. But it wasn't the one she thought she'd make. The day after the meeting at Tesla's headquarters, everything changed. It wasn't an instant shift, there were no bright lights, no sudden revelations. But by the end of that evening, Sarah could feel the weight of their decision pressing on her more heavily than ever before. Max had woken up that morning asking about his big meeting the day before. He was excited, proud of his new toys and the attention they had received. He spoke about it with a child's innocence, but Sarah's heart ached as she watched him. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep the facade up, how much longer she could pretend that everything was fine when, deep down, she felt as though they had just sold their souls. The final paperwork had arrived early that morning. It was thick, a stack of contracts and clauses, promises and guarantees. Jeremy had gone through it with a sense of detached excitement, checking off each section, ticking boxes that felt more and more like chains. He wanted this, he said. He believed in it. But Sarah wasn't sure anymore. By noon, Sarah found herself pacing the kitchen, her mind racing. She kept replaying the events of the past few weeks in her head, the meetings, the offers, the promises of a bright future. They had all been lured by the idea of success, of wealth, of giving Max everything he could ever want. But now, with the decision looming, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had made a deal with the devil. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Jason, confirming their final meeting later in the afternoon to sign the deal. Final step. Let's make this official. She stared at the message for what felt like forever. The screen blurred as her emotions caught up with her. The anticipation, the excitement that had initially filled her chest had now turned into dread. She needed to talk to Jeremy. She needed to make him understand. Jeremy was in his office, going over some emails. When she knocked on the door, he barely looked up. "We need to talk," Sarah said, her voice tight. He paused, glancing at her. "About the contract? We're signing it today, right?" "No," Sarah replied, shaking her head. "I can't do it. I can't sign it. This isn't what I thought it was going to be." Jeremy's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. "What are you saying? We've worked for this. This is everything we've dreamed of, everything Max deserves. We can't back out now." "I know, Jeremy," she said, her voice breaking. "But at what cost? Look at him, he's just a child. I'm afraid we're making him a pawn in a game that we can't control. What happens when he's not a cute little genius anymore? What happens when the world moves on?" "Max is different, Sarah," Jeremy snapped, standing up now, his frustration boiling over. "He's not like other kids. He's special. We can't protect him forever. We have to let him be part of this world, whether we like it or not." She swallowed hard, the sting of his words cutting deeper than she expected. But she couldn't back down. "I'm not saying we shelter him," she said quietly. "But I am saying that maybe we don't have to sell him out in the process. Maybe there's another way." Jeremy stood in silence for a long moment, his jaw clenched. "So what? You want to pull out of everything we've built so far? You want to walk away from everything that's been promised? To turn our backs on the future?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced them back. She couldn't break down now. Not when the decision was so important. "I want Max to have a future, Jeremy," she said softly. "But I want it to be his future. Not one dictated by Tesla, not one dictated by all of this." She waved her hand around, gesturing toward the world they had been swept into. "I just want him to be a kid." The room was silent after that. Max's laughter could be heard from the other room as he played with his toys, blissfully unaware of the tension hanging in the air. "I need to think," Jeremy finally said, his voice quieter than it had been all morning. "I'll go for a walk." Sarah sat there for a long time, the heavy silence of the house swallowing her whole. She thought about everything, the moments when she had believed the offers were a blessing, when she had thought that securing Max's future would be the best thing they could do for him. But now, it felt more like a trap. They had gotten so caught up in the dream of what could be, they had forgotten what really mattered, Max's happiness, his innocence, and their family. The afternoon dragged on. By the time Jeremy returned, he looked as if he had aged a decade. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "I've thought about it," he said, his voice low. "And I'm torn, Sarah. I really am. Part of me wants to go through with it. I've never been this close to something so big before. But the other part of me," he stopped, shaking his head. "I don't know if I can live with myself if we keep pushing him into this. If we let this world consume him." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes again, but this time, she let them fall. "We don't have to do this, Jeremy. We still have time to choose a different path. We can protect him from all of this." The decision was made, not with a grand flourish but with a quiet, resolute understanding. They would walk away. They would turn down the contract. And as Sarah sat on the couch, holding Max close as he napped in her arms, she felt a sense of relief she hadn't known in weeks. The path ahead would be uncertain, difficult, and filled with challenges. But it would be their path. It would be Max's path. They weren't done yet. The reckoning was just beginning. The morning after the decision was made, the storm arrived. It wasn't the kind of storm you could see coming on the horizon, but a sudden, chaotic burst of energy that rattled everything in its path. Sarah was in the kitchen, trying to prepare a simple breakfast, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She had braced herself for this moment, but nothing could prepare her for the way the world seemed to come crashing down around them. It was an email from Jason. The subject line read, "Your decision, we need to talk." She opened it, her hands trembling slightly as she read through the message. "Sarah, Jeremy. We were very surprised to hear about your decision to walk away from the deal. Given the amount of time and resources we've already invested in this partnership, we're going to have to reconsider our position moving forward. We hope you understand the gravity of this choice. Let's talk soon." The words stung more than she expected. "We were very surprised. We'll reconsider our position." Every sentence felt like a weight, a heavy reminder of what they had just turned down. Before she could process the email fully, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Elon Musk himself. The call went unanswered. Sarah knew it was coming, but she couldn't bring herself to pick up. If she answered, it would be real. The world they had just chosen to walk away from would be right there on the other end of the line, asking them to reconsider, to return. The phone continued to buzz, a persistent reminder of the opportunity they had just let slip through their fingers. She stared at the screen for a moment longer before turning it off completely. It wasn't long before Jeremy walked into the kitchen, the same storm clouds hanging over his face. "Did you see it?" he asked quietly, his voice laced with anxiety. Sarah nodded, holding up the phone. "Jason's email. Elon's been trying to reach us." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen floor in frustration. "I thought we had made the right choice, but now. I don't know. I never thought they'd take it this hard. We were the ones in control, Sarah. We walked away. But now it feels like we've lost everything," she finished for him, her voice quiet, almost defeated. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I'm starting to think maybe we didn't know what we were doing. Maybe this was too big for us to handle." The pressure of the decision was now weighing down on them in ways they hadn't anticipated. With each email, each message from Tesla, they could feel the reality of their choice settling in. They had chosen to walk away from something that could have secured Max's future. Now, all they had was doubt. Doubt about whether they had done the right thing, whether they had made the right decision for Max's future, and, more importantly, whether they could live with the consequences. The house, once filled with hope and ambition, now felt empty. Max played quietly in his room, unaware of the whirlwind happening just outside his door. He was still the same curious, bright child. But the people who were supposed to protect him, the people who were supposed to be his anchors, were slowly unraveling. Later that day, the fallout deepened. A phone call came from a reporter from Tech News. They had caught wind of Sarah and Jeremy's decision and wanted a comment. A few hours later, an article went live. It wasn't flattering. The headline read, "Family walks away from Tesla deal, a bold move or a reckless decision." The article painted them as naive, out of touch with the realities of the world they were trying to navigate. It speculated about their motivations. Was it pride? Was it fear? And it questioned whether they had done the right thing by rejecting an offer that many in the industry would have killed for. Sarah felt the sting of the words, each one cutting deeper. They were being painted as failures before the world even understood what was at stake. The thought of people judging their decisions without knowing the full picture made her sick to her stomach. And then there was the pressure from family. Her parents called, and then Jeremy's. They didn't understand. They thought they were making a mistake. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime," they said. "Why walk away? Max could be set for life." Each call left Sarah feeling smaller, less sure of herself. She had hoped that they would support their decision, but instead, she felt like they were on the defensive, constantly having to explain why they had chosen to reject the world's biggest tech company. The world outside was moving on. Tesla's next big project was being revealed, and Max's name was nowhere in the headlines. That space that had been reserved for him, the future that had seemed so bright just days ago, was now occupied by someone else. Someone else's child, someone else's genius. It was hard to escape the feeling of loss. That night, as Sarah sat with Jeremy on the couch, the weight of everything came crashing down. The phone had been silent for hours, but the silence between them felt like the loudest thing in the world. "What if we were wrong?" Jeremy asked quietly. His voice was thick with emotion. "What if we really just threw away our son's future for nothing?" Sarah shook her head, feeling the tears begin to build. "I don't know, Jeremy. But I couldn't live with myself if it meant losing him in the process. I couldn't let him become something he's not. We've always done our best for him," Jeremy whispered. "Maybe we'll find another way. Maybe this was just a bump in the road." But even as he said the words, Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes. She could see the uncertainty in his soul, the same uncertainty that had settled in hers. They had walked away from the deal, but in doing so, they had lost something. The world they had rejected wasn't going to wait for them to change their minds. The path forward would be harder than they had ever imagined. But they were going to face it together. The days following their decision to walk away from the Tesla deal felt like an uphill battle. Every step forward seemed to be met with resistance, whether it was the endless waves of media scrutiny, the disappointment from their families, or their own lingering doubts. It felt as though the world was closing in on them, and the hope that had once felt so bright now seemed like a distant memory. Sarah and Jeremy spent most of their time trying to pick up the pieces. The phone calls from tech news and other outlets continued, each article more disparaging than the last. Their inbox was flooded with messages, some supportive, but many more critical. People questioned their sanity, their priorities. Their decision to walk away from the Tesla deal, a chance to secure Max's future, was painted as an act of recklessness, a decision made out of ego and pride. But through it all, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had made the right choice. She knew that, deep down, they had chosen a path that was more aligned with their values, their family's well-being, and most importantly, Max's happiness. Still, the pressure was relentless. It wasn't until a week later that something unexpected happened. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to catch up on emails, when the doorbell rang. She glanced up, surprised. No one came by unannounced anymore, and with the way things had been going, she wasn't expecting any visitors. She opened the door, and there, standing on the porch, was a figure she never expected to see. "Jason?" she asked, her voice laced with surprise. "What are you doing here?" Jason stood there, dressed in a simple suit, looking out of place on the doorstep. His expression was serious, yet not hostile, which immediately threw Sarah off. After the emails, the messages, the harsh words, she hadn't expected him to show up like this. "Can we talk?" Jason asked, his voice low and measured. After a moment of hesitation, Sarah stepped aside to let him in. Jeremy had stepped out earlier to grab some things, so the house was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. Sarah led him into the living room and offered him a seat. He declined, choosing instead to stand near the window. "Listen," Jason began, his voice strained but sincere, "I know things have been rough. I know you two are probably feeling like you've made the biggest mistake of your lives, but I'm here to tell you something." Sarah folded her arms across her chest, unsure of what to make of this visit. "What's going on, Jason?" Jason ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I know it seems like we're all just playing the game. That's how it's been. Tesla, the industry, it's all a machine. But what you don't realize is that there are other ways. There are other opportunities out there. I've been working behind the scenes, trying to make something happen for Max, something that's, well, something that's a little more human." Sarah's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "You're talking about another deal, aren't you?" Jason shook his head. "No. Not a deal. Something entirely different. Something that could actually give Max the chance to grow into his potential, without being a cog in the corporate machine. But I need your trust for it to work." It was hard to wrap her mind around what he was saying. For so long, Sarah had associated Jason with the high-powered world of Tesla, the industry of innovation, and the cold, calculated decisions that came with it. But now, standing in front of her, he seemed different. His demeanor had changed, the edge in his voice softened. "I don't know what to say, Jason," Sarah said slowly, her thoughts racing. "We walked away from all of it for a reason. We couldn't keep pushing Max into a world where he was just another project, another child prodigy to be exploited." "I get that," Jason said, his voice filled with understanding. "But here's the thing. There are people who see Max for what he really is, not just for his potential as a business asset. And I've managed to get them on board. This is a chance for him to explore his mind, his creativity, without the strings attached to a corporation. This is about him, not about the money." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of possibility. Sarah found herself caught between hope and skepticism. Could this really be the answer? Could there truly be an opportunity that allowed Max to be himself without the heavy hand of corporate ambition? Could she trust Jason, the very person who had once been so deeply embedded in the machine they had just walked away from? "I don't know, Jason," Sarah said finally. It's hard to believe, especially after everything that's happened. I understand, he replied. But think about it. This isn't about a big corporate deal. It's about giving Max a chance to grow, to become who he's meant to be, on his own terms. No strings attached, no expectations. Just an opportunity for him to use his gifts without the pressure of being the next big thing in the tech world. Sarah didn't know what to say. A part of her wanted to believe Jason, wanted to think that there was a way forward, a way to give Max a chance to flourish without the fear of being consumed by the very system they had fought against. But after everything, could she really trust him? Take some time to think about it, Jason said, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but I promise you, this is different. It's real. And it could change everything for Max. With that, he turned and left, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway, her mind spinning. Later that evening, when Jeremy came home, Sarah told him everything. She watched as his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, and finally to curiosity. You really think we should consider it? Jeremy asked, his voice low, his gaze thoughtful. After everything that's happened, do we even have a choice? I don't know, Sarah replied honestly. But maybe this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. Maybe this is the one that lets Max be who he really is. Jeremy sat down next to her, the weight of the decision hanging over them. I don't want to rush into anything. But I think it's worth exploring. For Max. And so, with cautious hope, they decided to move forward. This time, they weren't just making a decision for their son's future. They were making a decision for their family, their values, and their belief in what could be. The decision wasn't easy. Sarah and Jeremy sat in the living room long after the sun had set, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of the lamps. The weight of the choice they were about to make pressed down on them, and yet, something about it felt different. For the first time in weeks, they both felt a glimmer of hope, a spark that maybe, just maybe, this was the path they were meant to take. Do we really do this? Jeremy asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. He was leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together as though in prayer. The tension in his posture was unmistakable. I don't know, but I think we have to, Sarah replied, her voice steady but her mind racing. Jason came here, he didn't have to. He's not asking for anything from us. He's just giving us a chance to think differently. Jeremy exhaled, glancing over at the quiet corner of the room where Max sat playing with his toy blocks. Max had no idea what was happening, of course. He was still the same bright-eyed child, unaware of the monumental decision his parents were about to make on his behalf. I want what's best for him, Jeremy said quietly, his gaze fixed on Max, but after everything, the media, the articles, the pressure, it's like we're being pulled in 100 different directions. How do we know this is the right choice? Sarah hesitated, her mind replaying the series of events that had led them here, the rejection of the Tesla deal, the fallout, the unexpected visit from Jason. There were so many unknowns in front of them, so many risks they couldn't anticipate. And yet, in her heart, she couldn't ignore the feeling that this was an opportunity for Max to be more than just a project, more than just the next big thing in the tech world. We can't know everything, Sarah said finally, standing up and walking to the window. But I know this, we've always wanted Max to have a life of his own. We didn't want him to be shaped by other people's expectations. Jason said this isn't about the money. It's about his future, and maybe for the first time, we'll be able to help him discover who he really is. Jeremy sighed, standing up to join her by the window. You're right. I need to believe it. Believe that there's more to this than what it seems. They spent the next few days in quiet contemplation, reviewing every piece of information they had. They tried to reach out to Jason, but he had warned them that it might take some time before they could set up the meeting with the people behind the opportunity. All they could do for now was wait. And as they waited, the pressure mounted. The media continued to pounce, with more articles criticizing their decision to turn down the Tesla deal, and family members called, once again expressing their doubts. The weight of the world felt like it was pushing them toward a decision they weren't ready to make. But they couldn't avoid the inevitable forever. When Jason finally called, they were both at home, sitting together in the living room, ready to hear what came next. "Sarah, Jeremy, it's good to talk to you," Jason's voice came through the phone, calm and professional, but with an undercurrent of excitement. "I know this has been a tough road for you, but I think we're ready to show you what we've been working on. Are you both free to meet this week?" "Yes," Sarah replied immediately, her heart pounding. "We're ready." Jason paused for a moment. "Great. We've set up a meeting. I'll send you the details, but I want you to know, this is big. It's going to be a huge shift for Max, but it's a chance for him to really explore who he is outside of the constraints of this world. Just be prepared, this is going to be different." Sarah and Jeremy exchanged a look. There was so much uncertainty in those words. Different could mean anything. But it could also mean exactly what they were looking for, a way to let Max be himself without the constant pressure. "We're ready," Jeremy said, his voice firm despite the nervousness in his eyes. The meeting was set for 3 days later, at a private location outside of town. The instructions were vague, but that was to be expected. They had been promised that this opportunity was unlike anything they had ever encountered, and the secrecy only added to the mystery. On the day of the meeting, Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. She kept checking the time, hoping they wouldn't be late, wondering what would await them on the other side of the drive. Jeremy drove, keeping his eyes focused on the road, but Sarah could see the doubt flickering in his eyes every now and then. Was this the right choice? Would they be walking into something they didn't understand? "I trust you," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Whatever happens, I'm in this with you." Jeremy smiled briefly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I trust you, too. Let's just hope we're making the right decision for Max." When they arrived, they were greeted by a woman Sarah had never seen before. She was tall, with sharp features and an air of authority, but there was something warm in her eyes that immediately put Sarah at ease. "Sarah, Jeremy, welcome," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Olivia. I'm part of the team here. We've been looking forward to meeting you." She led them into a conference room, where 2 more people were waiting. One was an older man, dressed in casual clothes, and the other was a woman in her mid-30s, wearing a smart blazer and holding a tablet in her hands. "Please, have a seat," Olivia said. "We know this has been a big decision for you, and we respect the choice you've made. We're here to offer you a chance for Max to explore his potential in a way no one else can. No strings. No expectations. Just an opportunity." Sarah and Jeremy exchanged a glance. The room was filled with an air of professionalism, but there was something else, too. Something that felt right. "We're listening," Jeremy said, leaning forward. "Tell us everything." Olivia smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of hope, real hope, take root. They were finally on the brink of something new, something different. Max's future, their future, it was all about to change. The room was filled with an eerie silence. Sarah and Jeremy sat on the edge of their seats, their minds racing as Olivia began to explain the details of what they had walked into. At first, everything seemed straightforward, an opportunity for Max to explore his potential, free from corporate pressure, and with resources unlike any they had ever imagined. But as Olivia spoke, something in her tone, something in the way she looked at them, made Sarah's stomach churn with suspicion. "We've been working on this for years," Olivia said, her voice smooth, almost hypnotic. "It's an initiative that focuses on rare, highly intelligent children, those who have the potential to change the world in ways most of us can't even fathom. Max has something extraordinary inside him, and we want to give him the tools to harness that power." Sarah exchanged a quick look with Jeremy. "This doesn't sound like just a research project. What exactly are you offering Max?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Olivia didn't seem fazed by the question. Instead, she leaned forward, locking eyes with both of them. "We're offering him a place where he can thrive, free from the distractions of society's expectations. A place where he'll have the opportunity to develop his mind, his skills, and his creativity, untouched by the limitations that the outside world would impose." "That sounds wonderful," Jeremy said, though Sarah could hear the skepticism in his voice. "But what's the catch?" Olivia paused for a moment, her smile never wavering. "There's no catch, Jeremy. Just a chance for Max to fulfill his potential in ways we can't even describe yet. This is bigger than any school or program he could ever be a part of. We're talking about a level of opportunity that goes beyond what anyone in the mainstream world is capable of offering." Sarah felt her heart race. Something wasn't right. The way Olivia spoke, the cryptic nature of her words, it all felt too polished, too rehearsed. She turned to Jeremy, her mind whirling with questions. This wasn't just an opportunity to help Max. There was something deeper at play here, something they weren't being told. "We need to know more," Sarah said, her voice firm. "What exactly are you asking of us?" Olivia's smile remained, but there was a subtle shift in her posture. "Max will be given access to the most advanced technology and resources. The people involved in this project are at the forefront of innovation, scientists, engineers, thinkers who are pioneering new ways to approach intelligence, creativity, and human potential. He will be in good hands." "But what does that mean for him?" Jeremy pressed. "What are you going to do with him?" There was a long silence before Olivia spoke again. "Max will be allowed to learn, grow, and explore in ways that the world isn't ready for. But we will need his full cooperation, and we'll need yours as well. He will need to be committed to the program fully, no distractions, no outside influences." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. "You're not saying this is some sort of experiment, are you?" For the first time, Olivia's demeanor shifted slightly. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. "Max is special. He's not like other children. And the potential he has could change the course of human history. This is about giving him the chance to realize that potential, no matter what it takes. But yes, there will be some unconventional methods involved." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to make of those last words, but something in the air felt ominous. This wasn't the opportunity they had imagined. The more they heard, the less it sounded like a chance for Max to explore his abilities and more like a program that wanted to control those abilities. "Unconventional methods?" Jeremy's voice was sharp. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Olivia's eyes flickered momentarily, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something darker beneath the surface. "It's difficult to explain in terms you'll easily understand. But I assure you, everything we do will be for Max's benefit. He will be surrounded by the best minds, the best resources. This isn't about profit, it's about maximizing human potential." Sarah's mind raced as she processed everything. Max was special, yes, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pushed towards something that could change him forever. She thought of the way they had made the decision to walk away from Tesla, to protect Max, to protect his childhood, and to shield him from being a mere tool in someone else's game. And now, here they were, faced with another choice, another chance that seemed too good to be true. She couldn't stay silent anymore. "Tell us what's really going on, Olivia," she said, her voice colder now. "What exactly are you offering us? And why the secrecy?" For a moment, Olivia said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke. "This isn't just an opportunity for Max. It's an opportunity for all of us. What we're offering you isn't just a program for Max's development. It's a partnership. A chance for you and Jeremy to be a part of something that could change everything. We're talking about access to resources, funding, technology, and a network of people who are working towards something bigger than any of us." Her words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. A partnership? This was more than just an opportunity for Max, it was a way for them to be pulled into something far larger than they had imagined. It was no longer just about Max's future, it was about something much more complex, more dangerous. And Sarah wasn't sure they could trust it. Jeremy's voice broke through her thoughts. This sounds like more than we bargained for. We need time to think about this. Olivia nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course. Take your time. But remember, opportunities like this don't come around often. The clock is ticking. As they left the meeting, the weight of what had just been revealed settled heavily on their shoulders. Sarah and Jeremy didn't speak at first. The drive back to their house was quiet, the hum of the tires on the road the only sound between them. When they finally pulled into the driveway, Sarah felt like they were standing on the edge of a precipice. They had been given a choice, but was it really a choice? Or had they just been led down another path where the outcome was already decided? We can't make a decision right now, Jeremy said as they sat in the car, staring out the windshield. No, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to know more. We need to understand exactly what this program is, what they're offering, and what they expect from us. As they walked inside, Max greeted them with his usual enthusiasm, unaware of the storm brewing around them. For now, he was safe. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their son was caught in the middle of something far bigger than they could have ever imagined. The night was dark, but it was not the quiet kind of darkness. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with the hum of uncertainty that refused to let go of Sarah and Jeremy. They sat together in their living room, the flickering light of the television the only thing breaking the silence. Max had gone to bed hours ago, his sweet face peaceful in sleep, unaware of the storm raging just outside his door. Sarah's thoughts were a whirl of confusion. The decision they had to make was too big, too loaded with unknowns. The more they learned about the program Olivia had described, the more questions arose, questions that didn't have answers. And yet, as the clock ticked past midnight, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something monumental. This wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about who they were becoming as parents, who they were willing to be in order to give their son the life he deserved. Jeremy, Sarah began, her voice breaking the quiet. She had said nothing for hours, but she could feel her own internal struggle rising to the surface. I keep thinking about what Olivia said. She's offering us everything we ever wanted, right? A future where Max can grow up free from the pressures of this world. Where we don't have to keep running from the media, from the judgment. Jeremy's eyes were on the floor, his fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest of the couch. I hear you. But the more I think about it, the more it doesn't sit right with me. If we accept this, if we put Max into this program they're talking about, are we really protecting him, or are we just putting him in the hands of people who see him as a project, not a child? His words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. A project. She hadn't been able to put it into words until now, but that was exactly what it felt like. Max wasn't just their son anymore. He was something bigger, something they could shape and mold, something the world wanted to study and use. She had thought the opportunity would give Max the freedom to be himself, but now it seemed like just another cage, decorated with the promise of freedom. I'm scared, Sarah admitted, her voice shaky. What if we're making a mistake? What if this is the wrong path, and we're too blinded by the potential to see it? Jeremy reached for her hand, his grip tight but reassuring. I'm scared too. But what other choice do we have? We're already caught in the whirlwind, Sarah. This isn't just about what we want, it's about what Max needs. He's not like other kids. He's special, and no matter what we choose, that's not going to change. But what if, Sarah began, but her voice trailed off. She didn't know how to finish the sentence. What if they were making him a part of something that would break him? What if they couldn't protect him from the system they were stepping into? The next morning, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had happened the night before. She sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space across from her. The house was still, the silence almost unbearable. Every inch of her mind screamed for her to make the right choice, to protect Max no matter what, but the weight of the decision was too heavy to bear. There were no easy answers, no way of knowing for sure what the future held. And then, as if by fate, her phone buzzed. It was an email from Jason, the one who had first brought them into contact with Olivia. The subject line was simple: Max's future. She clicked it open, and as she read through the message, her stomach dropped. The email was more cryptic than anything they had been told in person, filled with vague references to opportunities and growth potential, but one line stood out. "We believe Max is the key to something greater. You and Jeremy have a role to play in this as well. It's time to embrace the future." The words were simple enough, but their meaning was clear. This wasn't just about Max anymore. This was about something larger, something they hadn't fully understood until now. They had been chosen, whether they liked it or not, to be part of a bigger plan. And that plan was moving forward with or without them. Just as she finished reading, Jeremy entered the kitchen, his face grim. He had been up for hours, processing everything in silence, but now he stood before her, a decision finally set in his eyes. "I spoke to a few people this morning. I did some digging into Olivia's team, into their work. What they're offering is big. Too big. But it's real. It's not a scam. They're not just trying to exploit us." Sarah's heart raced. "So, what does that mean? Are you saying we should go for it?" Jeremy shook his head slowly, his voice quiet. "I don't know. I wish I had a clear answer. But after everything we've been through, the rejection from Tesla, the media circus, the pressure from family, I don't think we can just ignore this. We have to at least consider it. For Max." The words stung, but they were the truth. They had been backed into a corner, forced to face a choice they hadn't expected. Sarah thought about Max, about his potential, his bright, inquisitive mind. What if this was the best chance he had to grow, to truly be himself, without the constant pressure of the outside world? But then, the fear crept in again. What if we're wrong? What if we lose him in the process? The decision came down to one last question: could they trust the people who were offering Max a place in their world, or were they simply being used as pawns in someone else's game? "We'll have to meet with them again," Sarah said finally, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside. "We need answers. We need to understand what they expect from us. And from Max." Jeremy nodded, his face resolute. "I agree. But this time, we go in prepared. We'll ask the hard questions. We'll make sure we understand exactly what this is before we make a decision." Later that day, they called Olivia to schedule one last meeting. The pressure was still there, the weight of the unknown pressing on their shoulders, but now, Sarah and Jeremy were more prepared. They had to get to the truth, no matter the cost. When they arrived at the meeting, they walked in with a new sense of purpose. This was no longer just about Max's future, it was about theirs as well. And as they sat across from Olivia and the rest of her team, they knew one thing for sure. They would make this decision together, no matter how difficult it was. For Max. For their family. For the future. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?